The day I got promoted to director should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I had imagined it differently 100 times. I thought I would walk into the house with a shy smile, maybe holding a small cake from the bakery near my office. I imagined my husband lifting me off the floor in excitement, my mother-in-law nodding proudly for once instead of criticizing the way I cut vegetables or fold laundry. Instead, the first thing I heard when I stepped into the living room was laughter. "Look who's here, the director herself has arrived," my husband shouted dramatically, clapping his hands in slow, exaggerated applause. My mother-in-law burst out laughing. "Director? Of what?" "Of washing dishes," she added, barely able to control her giggles. They didn't even try to hide it. They were amused, genuinely amused, as if my promotion was the funniest joke of the year. I stood there in the doorway, still holding my handbag, my heart beating so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. I had worked 7 years at that company. 7 years of overtime, skipped lunches, and weekends spent preparing presentations while my husband watched football and his mother criticized my cooking. 7 years of proving that I was more than just a wife. And today, the board had officially appointed me as director of operations. But in my own home, I was still a punchline. My husband leaned back on the couch, shaking his head. "Seriously, how does that even happen? Did your boss feel sorry for you or something?" My mother-in-law added, "They probably needed someone obedient. You've had good training at home." They laughed again. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like thin glass under pressure. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I didn't defend myself. I simply walked past them and went into the bedroom. That night, I didn't sleep much. Their laughter echoed in my head. I realized something painful. They had never believed in me. Not once. Every time I stayed late at work, they accused me of neglecting my real duties. Every time I talked about a new project, they rolled their eyes. My achievements made them uncomfortable because they challenged the version of me they preferred, the small, obedient, convenient version. But here was the truth they didn't see: my promotion wasn't luck. It wasn't pity, it wasn't charity, it was power. Over the next few weeks, my life changed rapidly. My new position came with a significant salary increase, a company car, and most importantly, authority. I now managed a team of 80 employees. I attended executive meetings. My signature mattered. My decisions shaped company strategy. At home, however, nothing changed, at least not at first. My husband continued making sarcastic comments. "So, director, can you direct the laundry into the washing machine?" My mother-in-law smirked every time I mentioned work. But slowly, reality began to creep in. One evening, my husband casually asked, "By the way, how much more are you making now?" I looked at him calmly. "About 3 times your salary." He laughed, then stopped when he realized I wasn't joking. 3 times. The air shifted in the room. Suddenly, my late meetings were no longer excuses. They were important responsibilities. My business trips became impressive. My mother-in-law even started telling neighbors, "Our daughter-in-law is a director, you know." But I saw through it. Their respect wasn't for me. It was for the money, the title, the status, and that realization changed everything. 2 months later, my company announced a large expansion project. We needed a new logistics contractor. Several local firms submitted proposals. One of them belonged to my husband. He had been struggling financially for years. His small logistics company survived mostly through short-term contracts and borrowed money. When he found out my company was seeking contractors, he was ecstatic. "This is perfect," he said one night. "You can just make sure we win the contract." I looked at him carefully. "You'll need to go through the standard selection process." He waved his hand dismissively. "Come on, you're the director now. Just help a little. It's family. Family. The same family that laughed at me." I explained that the process was transparent and competitive. I couldn't interfere. It would be unethical and illegal. He didn't like that. For days, tension filled the house. My mother-in-law joined the pressure campaign. "Why else did you work so hard?" she asked sharply. "If you can't even support your own husband." Support. Was support supposed to mean risking my career? The selection day arrived. After reviewing all proposals with the board, we chose the most qualified and cost-effective company. It wasn't his. When I came home that evening, he was furious. "You embarrassed me," he shouted. "You could have fixed this." "I didn't embarrass you," I said calmly. "Your proposal wasn't competitive enough." He stared at me as if he didn't recognize me. This wasn't the quiet wife who avoided arguments. This was someone else, someone confident, someone independent. That night, for the first time, I didn't feel small in my own home. Weeks passed. His business continued to struggle. Meanwhile, my career soared. I was invited to speak at a regional business conference about leadership and growth. My photo appeared in an industry magazine. The same husband who once laughed now carefully ironed his shirt to attend the conference as my guest. The same mother-in-law who mocked my promotion told relatives, we always knew she was ambitious. But the dynamic had changed, not because of money. Because of boundaries. I stopped over-explaining myself. I stopped asking permission to work late. I stopped apologizing for success. And something interesting happened. The laughter disappeared. Respect replaced it. Not forced respect. Not fake admiration. Real, cautious respect. They had underestimated me because I allowed it. I had shrunk myself to keep peace. I had dimmed my light so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Now I refused. 6 months after my promotion, I made another decision. A personal one. I bought an apartment in my own name. Not because I planned to leave immediately, but because I needed security. Independence. A reminder that I would never again be trapped by someone else's approval. When my husband found out, he was stunned. You bought property without telling me. Yes, I replied evenly. Just like you expected me to secure contracts without telling anyone. He didn't argue. He couldn't. He had finally understood something crucial. I wasn't asking for validation anymore. I was building my own foundation. Over time, our relationship shifted into something more balanced, or at least more honest. He stopped mocking. He started consulting me seriously about business improvements. I even helped him refine his logistics strategy, legally, professionally, without favoritism. He eventually rebuilt his company the right way. As for my mother-in-law, she never apologized directly. But one evening, while we were alone in the kitchen, she said quietly, "You proved everyone wrong." It wasn't a full apology. But it was something. The irony of it all still makes me smile. The day they laughed, they thought I had reached the peak of my importance. In reality, that day was just the beginning. They laughed at my title. But what they didn't realize was that the real promotion wasn't on paper. It was internal. I had promoted myself, from insecure to confident, from dependent to independent, from underestimated to unstoppable. And now, when I walk into a room, no one laughs. They stand up. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting back. It's rising so high that the laughter fades into silence, and then into applause. When people ask me what changed after that first storm, after the contract fight, after the apartment purchase, after the silence replaced their laughter, I usually smile and say, everything. But the truth is more complicated. Success doesn't magically fix relationships. It exposes them. Part 2 of my story didn't begin with another dramatic argument. It began quietly, with small shifts that slowly rearranged the balance of power in our home. After my husband lost the contract bid, something in him hardened. Not openly, not aggressively, but subtly. He became quieter, more observant, as if he was studying me. For years, I had been predictable. I would apologize first. I would smooth things over. I would sacrifice. Now I didn't. One evening, about 3 months after the failed bid, he sat across from me at the dinner table and asked, "Do you even need me anymore?" It wasn't angry. It wasn't sarcastic. It was afraid. That question revealed more than all his previous mockery combined. I put down my fork. "I never needed you for money," I said calmly. "I needed you for partnership." He looked away. For the first time, we weren't fighting about contracts or salaries. We were confronting something deeper, insecurity. My success had forced him to face his own fears. He had grown up believing a man must always earn more, lead more, control more. My promotion disrupted that belief system completely. And while he had laughed at first, deep down it had shaken him. Over the next few weeks, tension resurfaced in different ways. He questioned my travel schedule. He asked who I met at conferences. He made comments like, "Must be nice living that executive life." Old patterns trying to survive in a new reality. But this time, I didn't react emotionally. I responded strategically. I invited him to one of our executive networking dinners. Not as a trophy husband, but as an observer. I wanted him to see what my world actually looked like. That evening changed something. He watched me negotiate calmly with senior investors. He saw how people listened when I spoke. He noticed how confidently I handled difficult questions. On the drive home, he was unusually silent. Finally, he said, I didn't know you were, like that." "Like what?" I asked. "Strong." It was ironic. I had always been strong. I just hadn't been loud about it. But part 2 of this story isn't only about him. It's about me discovering the parts of myself I had ignored. With my increased income, I invested in leadership coaching. Not because I lacked ability, but because I wanted to grow intentionally. I attended advanced strategy workshops. I built connections outside my company. I started mentoring younger women in our organization who were struggling with the same challenges I once faced, being underestimated. One of them, Alina, once told me, "When they interrupt me in meetings, I freeze." I smiled gently. "Then don't freeze. Finish your sentence. Slowly, calmly, look them in the eye." Teaching her reminded me how far I had come. Meanwhile, at home, the dynamic continued evolving. My mother-in-law began treating me with cautious politeness. No more sarcastic remarks about washing dish directors. Instead, she asked about company updates. But I noticed something else. She began speaking differently to neighbors. Instead of taking credit for raising me well, she simply said, "She worked hard." That subtle shift mattered. However, the real turning point of part 2 happened unexpectedly. About 8 months after my promotion, our company faced a crisis. A major supplier failed to deliver critical materials. Production delays threatened millions in losses. The board panicked. Shareholders demanded answers. As director of operations, the responsibility landed on my shoulders. For 2 straight weeks, I barely slept. I coordinated emergency negotiations, sourced alternative suppliers, and reorganized production schedules. It was the most stressful period of my career. And during that time, something surprising happened at home. My husband stepped up. He handled groceries. He cooked dinner. He told his mother not to disturb me. He even left encouraging notes on my desk. "You've handled worse. Don't doubt yourself." I didn't expect that. One night, I returned home at nearly midnight, exhausted. He was waiting with tea. "You're going to fix this," he said confidently. "How do you know?" I asked. "Because you don't quit." For the first time, I heard admiration in his voice, not resentment. The crisis eventually stabilized. We secured emergency contracts and minimized financial damage. At the next board meeting, the CEO publicly praised my leadership. When I came home that evening, there was no sarcastic applause. There was real applause. My husband clapped sincerely. My mother-in-law even hugged me. That was the moment I realized something important. Sometimes people resist your growth not because they hate you, but because they fear losing their place beside you. Part 2 of my journey became less about proving them wrong and more about redefining partnership. We started having honest financial discussions. Transparent ones. No ego. No competition. I helped him analyze his business model more professionally. Not by giving unfair advantages, but by teaching him strategic planning, cost analysis, risk assessment, the same tools I used daily. He resisted at first, but then he applied them. Slowly, his company stabilized. He secured mid-sized contracts based on merit, not influence. His confidence returned, not from being above me, but from standing firmly on his own. One evening, nearly a year after my promotion, we sat on the balcony of the apartment I had purchased. "Yes," he admitted, "but not because you're successful. Because you no longer tolerate disrespect." That was true. Part 2 wasn't about money. It was about boundaries. I stopped laughing at jokes that belittled me. I stopped shrinking to protect fragile egos. I stopped accepting backhanded compliments. And interestingly, once I stopped accepting them, they stopped being offered. My mother-in-law eventually confessed something unexpected. "You remind me of myself when I was young," she said quietly one afternoon. I wanted to work, but my husband didn't allow it. For a moment, I saw her differently. Not as my critic, but as someone who had once buried her own ambition. Maybe some of her mockery had been projection. A defense mechanism. That realization softened me, not weakly, but wisely. Part 2 of my story also brought another major decision. I proposed a new initiative at work, a leadership program designed specifically for women returning from maternity leave. I had seen how many talented professionals lost opportunities because people assumed they were less committed. The board approved it. Leading that program became one of my proudest achievements. Watching women regain confidence, secure promotions, and challenge stereotypes reminded me why I fought so hard in the first place. At the program's first annual event, my husband sat in the front row. When I finished my speech about resilience and self-worth, he was the first to stand and applaud. That applause felt different from everything before. It wasn't ironic. It wasn't forced. It was earned. Looking back now, I understand something clearly. The laughter at the beginning was necessary. If they had celebrated me immediately, I might have remained the same version of myself, comfortable but constrained. Their mockery forced me to confront my own limits. It forced me to decide whether I would let their perception define me. Part 2 taught me that success isn't a destination. It's a transformation. It transforms how you see yourself. It transforms how others treat you. But most importantly, it reveals who is willing to grow with you, and who isn't. Today, when I enter my office, employees greet me with respect. When I enter my home, I am no longer the punchline. I am the partner, the leader, the woman who didn't break under laughter. And sometimes, late at night, I remember that first sarcastic clap. It doesn't hurt anymore. It motivates me, because the sweetest sound in the world isn't revenge. It's the silence that follows when people finally realize they underestimated you, and the steady applause that replaces it when you refuse to underestimate yourself.